Hello there, everyone, and welcome to the wild, weird, and wacky world of the Word. Yeah, today let's look at something that we already talked about earlier in the week. It's from Genesis, the 15th chapter. It's the covenant that God made with Abram. And you might recall that, God and Abram, they kind of got into it over the fact that, hey, God, you promised me descendants and ain't happening, and I'm an old guy now, so what's up with that? Well, God said, look, took Abram outside and said, look up at the sky and go ahead, count the stars. See how many stars are up there? That's going to be your descendants. That's how many you're going to have. Now, earlier in the book of Genesis, God had gone outside with Abram and said, hey, see all the dust on the earth? See all the dust around here? Yeah, that's how many descendants you're going to have. You tell me, which one do you like better? The stars in the sky or the dust on the earth? I'll take the stars. Okay, well, anyhow, make a long story short, this time when God tells Abram this is what's going to happen, and remember, his name is Abram right now. It's going to be Abraham in chapter 17. All right, but right now it's Abram. Well, he says, all right, here's the deal, Abram. I want you to get me, and these all have to be 3 years old now. I want you to get a heifer. I want you to get a female goat and get a ram, all from 3 years old. Oh, yeah, and get a turtle dove and a young pigeon while you're at it. Bring them to me. And so he goes out and brings them in, and he says, okay, now cut them in half, right down the middle. And he does that, except for the two birds. He didn't do that, he kept them whole. But he cut them in half, split them apart, and this was going to be part of the covenant ceremony. This is looking really weird. I mean, if you did something like that now, you, you'd be arrested for animal abuse. But let's talk about that. Now, basically, what happens is Abram falls asleep, but he's aware of what's going on during the whole time. He starts trembling in terror because this deep darkness falls on him. He knows something's happening, and then God shows up. God in the form of a flaming torch and a smoking fire pot, and that's what walks through the midst of these broken animals, these ones that have been ripped apart. Yeah. The Hebrew says God cut a covenant with him. Literally, he cut a covenant with him. Now, this is wild. It's weird. It's wacky. Where in the world did this come from? We don't see this anywhere else in the Bible. Oh, you see animal sacrifices, but you don't see anything like this, cutting one in half and then walking through it. So what's up with that? Well, hey, we have a really cool thing that happened in the 1930s. That was some Bedouin over in the area of the upper Euphrates River in Mesopotamia. He was kind of moving along and he stumbled upon a statue out in the middle of nowhere. And so he reported it to the authorities, who happened to be the French who ruled the area. And they uncovered a city, the city called Mari. Now, this city was, at the time, there's nothing left. It was just a bunch of dust and dirt because it had just been abandoned for millennia. It had been abandoned. And the Euphrates River had actually washed away 2/3 of it. It's not even there anymore. But when they excavated, what they found is absolutely awesome, absolutely incredible. And let me just look on my cheat sheet here. They found there 25,000 clay tablets written in the Akkadian language. And things all the way from like personal letters to official court documents. You name it, it was in there. And they found out In fact, they rewrote the history books after this discovery of the ancient area there, Mesopotamia area. Um, Evidently, it had been an important city for 1,200 years, a trade city. Also, there were some copper smelting copper smelting areas here as well. But anyhow, let's get to the point. In those clay tablets, they discovered something very interesting. They found mention of the Hebrew people. They found mention of Benjaminites from over in Canaan. So evidently there was some trade going on with them. But there was also talk about this really weird thing called a covenant agreement, in which animals were cut in half, set apart, and the two different groups that were making the covenant, could be individuals, could be groups, they would walk into the midst of these animals reciting their covenant agreement. And basically what they were saying is, if we don't hold up our end of the bargain, you can kill us. In fact, you can cut us in half, just like these animals. Isn't that wild, weird, and wacky? That's the way you made it. You didn't sign on the dotted line. You walked through the cut up animals. So that's something that became part of this covenant agreement between God and Abram. Now, the interesting thing about the Genesis 15 rendition of the covenant agreement is it's only God who passes through the split animals. Abram, he was just a witness to it. So it is God pledging himself to Abram, saying, this is what I'm going to do for you. Look up at the sky. Look at the stars. That's how many descendants you're going to have. I won't mess up my end of the agreement. It's going to happen, Abram. Wow. This is awesome stuff. And we really wouldn't know much about it if it weren't for the fact that some Bedouin shepherd bumped into a statue out in the fields one day, and all this great archaeological evidence was uncovered in the 1930s and even up till some more recent times. And pretty much all these clay tablets have been archived now, and they are such a rich, abundant source of the history of the people of that day, and really also help us to understand the life of people, in the very, very early stages of the history of Israel. Well, I guess that's all we're going to talk about today, because either you're thoroughly disgusted at this point with animals split in half, or maybe you're ready for an old-fashioned outdoor barbecue. God's blessings be with you, and enjoy your day.